He was a tech mogul consumed by revenge. She was the brilliant mind his enemy had discarded. When a wedding invitation arrived with a cruel message, it ignited a plan that would change everything.
Be my date to the wedding. Let's ruin his perfect day together.
This isn't just about closure, is it? This is personal.
What started as calculated vengeance became something neither expected. But in a world of corporate secrets and deadly rivalries, falling in love is the most dangerous game of all.
I fell for you, Zariah. You weren't part of the plan.
Prove it, not with words, but with what you do next.
Some enemies never forget. Some loves are worth risking everything for. Will their connection survive when the truth comes out, or will the past destroy their chance at a future? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. The sleek corporate office buzzed with activity as Zariah Monroe cleared out her desk. 4 years ago, she had walked into this building with dreams as big as the tech company that housed them. Now, at 25, she was walking away with a cardboard box of personal items and a heart that felt like it had been put through a paper shredder. "You don't have to do this," said Mia, her assistant and closest friend at Grayson Technologies. "He'll cool down. He always does." Zariah shook her head, her dark curls bouncing against her shoulders. "Not this time, Mia. I can't keep doing this. I won't." The argument with Elliot Grayson, CEO and founder of the company, and until 20 minutes ago, the man she thought she would spend her life with, had been loud enough for the entire executive floor to hear. It wasn't their first fight, but Zariah had decided it would be their last. "You're choosing your pride over us again," Elliot had shouted, his blue eyes cold as ice. "This is business, Zariah. You knew who I was when you got involved with me. Business." She had laughed, the sound hollow in the spacious office. "You stole my prototype and put your name on it. That's not business, Elliot. That's theft. It's my company." His fist had come down hard on the mahogany desk. "Everything created here belongs to me, including the work you do." "And what about me?" Zariah had asked, her voice suddenly quiet. "Do I belong to you too?" The silence that followed told her everything she needed to know. Now, as she placed her awards and photos into the box, she tried not to think about the 3 years they'd spent together. The late nights working side by side, the vacations to places she'd only dreamed of visiting, the way he'd once looked at her like she was the most brilliant woman in the world. "He's going to regret this," Mia said, handing Zariah her favorite coffee mug. "You're the best developer this company has." "And he knows it," Zariah replied, taking one last look around the office that had been her second home. "That's why he stole my work. He couldn't stand the idea that I might outshine him." The elevator ride to the lobby felt like descending into a new life. When the doors opened, Zariah stepped out with her head held high, even as whispers followed her across the marble floor. Just as she reached the revolving door, a familiar voice called her name. "Zariah, wait!" She turned to see Elliot striding toward her, his tall frame commanding attention in his perfectly tailored suit. For a moment, her heart betrayed her with a leap of hope. "You forgot something," he said, holding out a small device, the prototype she'd spent months developing. Zariah stared at it, then at him. "That's my work, Elliot." "Not anymore." His handsome face hardened. "You walk out that door, you're walking away from everything we built, everything I gave you." "You didn't give me anything," she said, feeling stronger with each word. "I earned my place here, and I'll earn it somewhere else too." Something flashed in his eyes, anger, surprise, maybe even a hint of respect. Then it was gone, replaced by the cold calculation she'd come to know too well. "No one will hire you after this," he said. "I'll make sure of it." Zariah felt the eyes of the entire lobby on them. Security guards, receptionists, employees hurrying to meetings. This was exactly what Elliot wanted, an audience for his power play. "You know what your problem is, Elliot," she said, keeping her voice steady. "You think love is something you can own, something you can control." She adjusted the box in her arms. "I feel sorry for the next woman who makes the mistake of loving you." With that, she pushed through the revolving door and into the bright spring morning, leaving behind the man who had taught her that success and love couldn't coexist, at least not on Elliot Grayson's terms. 4 years later, Zariah sat in her small but stylish office at Horizon Software, reviewing code on her computer screen. At 29, she had rebuilt her career from the ground up, fighting against Elliot's attempts to blacklist her in the industry. It hadn't been easy, but nothing worthwhile ever was. "Zariah, these came for you," said Damon, one of the junior developers, placing a stack of mail on her desk. "Thanks," she murmured, not looking up from her screen. After Elliot, Zariah had changed. She was still brilliant, still ambitious, but she kept to herself more. Her work was respected, her talent recognized, but she no longer craved the spotlight. She had learned the hard way what happened when you shone too brightly next to men who couldn't stand being outshined. It was nearly 6 when she finally sorted through her mail. Bills, industry magazines, a card from her mother, and at the bottom of the pile an elegant cream envelope with her name written in flowing calligraphy. Zariah frowned, turning the envelope over in her hands. She didn't recognize the handwriting, but something about it made her uneasy. She slid her finger under the seal and pulled out a heavy cardstock invitation. Mr. Elliot James Grayson and Miss Victoria Elizabeth Sinclair request the honor of your presence at their wedding. The words blurred before her eyes. Elliot, getting married, and he had invited her. A smaller note slipped from behind the invitation, a personal message in a handwriting she knew all too well. I thought you'd want to see what real commitment looks like. Zariah's hands trembled as she read the words again. After all this time, after everything he'd done, he was still trying to hurt her, still trying to prove that he had won. She dropped the invitation on her desk as if it had burned her. For a moment, she considered calling Mia, who had quit Grayson Technologies shortly after Zariah's departure and remained her closest friend. But pride kept her from reaching for her phone. She wouldn't give Elliot the satisfaction of knowing he'd gotten to her. Instead, she gathered her things and headed out, deciding a walk home might clear her head. The spring evening was warm, the streets of Boston busy with people enjoying the weather after a long winter. Zariah barely noticed any of it, her mind spinning with memories she'd thought were safely buried. You should have seen your face, Elliot had said once, after surprising her with tickets to Paris for her birthday. You light up the whole room when you smile. She hadn't smiled like that in years, not since the day she walked out of his building, his life, and his heart. By the time she reached her apartment, Zariah had made up her mind. She would throw the invitation away and forget about it. Elliot Grayson was her past, and she had worked too hard to build a future without him to let him drag her back now. But as she dropped her keys on the kitchen counter, her phone rang. It was Mia. Have you seen it? Mia asked without preamble. Seen what? Zariah replied, though she knew exactly what her friend was talking about. The announcement. Elliot's engagement. It's all over the tech news sites. Of course it was. Elliot had always known how to create a spectacle. I got an invitation, Zariah admitted, sinking onto her couch. You what? Mia's shock was audible. That arrogant, self-important. He included a note, Zariah cut in. Something about showing me what real commitment looks like. The silence on the other end of the line spoke volumes. Tell me you're not going, Mia finally said. Of course not. But even as she said it, something stirred inside Zariah. Not love, not even nostalgia, but a desire to show Elliot Grayson that he no longer had the power to hurt her. I have better things to do than watch him parade around with his perfect bride. Good, Mia said firmly. Because Victoria Sinclair is exactly what you'd expect. Old money, connections to every tech investor on the East Coast, and absolutely no backbone. She's perfect for him. After hanging up, Zariah pulled out the invitation again, studying the details. The wedding was to be held at the Sinclair family estate on the coast, just 2 weeks from now. It would be the society event of the season, no doubt covered by every magazine and website that followed the rich and powerful. Zariah tossed the invitation into the trash, then after a moment's hesitation, she fished it back out and placed it on her counter. Maybe she would go, not for Elliot, but for herself, to show him, and herself, that she had moved on. The Archer Gallery was crowded with Boston's elite, all gathered for the opening of a new exhibition by an up-and-coming artist. Zariah wouldn't normally attend such an event, but Mia had insisted, saying it would be good for her to get out and network. For you can't hide in your apartment forever, Mia had said. Besides, I heard Victoria Sinclair will be there without Elliot. Don't you want to see what kind of woman is willing to marry that egomaniac? So here she was, dressed in a simple but elegant black dress, her natural hair styled in a crown of curls that framed her face beautifully. She sipped champagne and pretended to be interested in the abstract paintings that covered the walls. Not a fan of modern art. The voice came from behind her, deep and smooth like expensive whiskey. Zariah turned to find herself looking up at a tall man with dark hair and piercing grey eyes. He was handsome in a severe way, his features sharp and aristocratic, his suit clearly custom-made for his broad shoulders. I'm more interested in the engineering behind the lighting system, she admitted, gesturing to the ceiling. The way they've designed it to highlight specific colors in each painting is fascinating. The man's mouth curved into a small smile. Spoken like a true tech person. Let me guess, software developer. How did you know? The way you're analyzing the practical application rather than the artistic intention. He extended his hand. Christian Vale. Zariah froze, the name immediately registering. Christian Vale, founder and CEO of Vale Industries, Elliot's biggest competitor and most feared rival. She had never met him, but everyone in the tech world knew of the legendary feud between Vale and Grayson. Zariah Monroe, she said, taking his hand. His grip was firm, his skin cool against hers. I know who you are, Ms. Monroe. Something flickered in his eyes. Interest, perhaps, or recognition. Your work on predictive algorithms at Horizon is impressive, much more impressive than anything coming out of Grayson Technologies these days. Zariah raised an eyebrow. You follow my work. I make it a point to know who the real talent is in this industry. He took a sip of his drink, his eyes never leaving her face. Especially when Elliot Grayson tried so hard to bury that talent. So he knew about her history with Elliot. Zariah wasn't surprised. The tech world was small and gossip traveled fast, especially when it involved someone as high profile as Elliot Grayson. Ancient history, she said with a dismissive wave. I've moved on. Have you? Christian's gaze was penetrating, as if he could see right through her carefully constructed facade. Then, why did you look like you'd seen a ghost when Victoria Sinclair walked in 10 minutes ago? Zariah glanced across the room to where a slender blonde woman was holding court, surrounded by admirers. Victoria was exactly as Zariah had imagined, beautiful in a polished, society-page way, with the confident air of someone who had never had to fight for anything in her life. I was just curious, Zariah said, turning back to Christian. Wouldn't you be curious about the woman who agreed to marry Elliot Grayson? Christian's smile turned knowing. Did you get an invitation? The question caught her off guard. How did you? Because I did too, he said, his voice hardening slightly, complete with a personal note suggesting I attend to see what success really looks like. Zariah couldn't help but laugh, the sound surprising even herself. He really is something, isn't he? Something, Christian agreed, his expression dark. That's one way to put it. They stood in silence for a moment, watching Victoria charm the crowd across the room. Zariah wondered what this woman knew about Elliot, if she had seen the ruthless side of him that had destroyed what they once had, or if he had managed to keep that part of himself hidden from her. I overheard something interesting earlier, Christian said, breaking the silence. Apparently Elliot has been telling people that you'll be attending the wedding. He seems quite certain of it. Zariah stiffened. Well, he's going to be disappointed. I threw the invitation away. Did you? Christian's eyes held hers, searching. Or did you just tell yourself you did? Before she could answer, a commotion near the entrance drew their attention. Elliot Grayson had arrived, fashionably late as always. He moved through the crowd with the easy confidence of a man who knew his worth and expected others to recognize it too. Zariah felt her chest tighten as Elliot made his way to Victoria, placing a possessive hand on the small of her back and leaning down to kiss her cheek. Then, as if sensing her gaze, he looked up and directly at Zariah. The shock on his face quickly gave way to something else, a smug smile that said he knew exactly what seeing him with Victoria would do to her. But then his eyes shifted to Christian standing beside her, and his expression darkened. I think we've been noticed, Christian murmured, so close to her ear that she could feel his breath on her skin. I should go, Zariah said, suddenly feeling exposed. This was a mistake. Christian caught her arm gently as she turned to leave. Wait, I have a proposition for you. She looked up at him warily. What kind of proposition? Be my date to the wedding, he said, his voice low and intense. Let's ruin his perfect day together. Zariah stared at him, trying to read the expression in those grey eyes. Was this about her, or was it just another move in whatever game he and Elliot had been playing for years? Why would you want me there? She asked. Because nothing would infuriate Elliot more than seeing you on my arm, Christian replied honestly, and because I think you deserve the chance to show him exactly what he lost. Zariah glanced back at Elliot, who was still watching them, his jaw clenched in barely contained anger. 4 years of building a new life, of proving to herself that she was more than what Elliot Grayson had tried to reduce her to. Maybe it was time to show him too. Yes, she said, turning back to Christian, but not for revenge, for closure. A slow smile spread across Christian's face, transforming his severe features into something almost charming. For closure, he agreed, though there was something darker in his voice that Zariah couldn't quite place. As they exchanged numbers, Zariah felt Elliot's eyes burning into her back. She didn't need to look to know he was watching, calculating, maybe even worrying. For the first time in 4 years, she felt a spark of something that had been missing from her life. Not happiness exactly, but anticipation, a sense that something was about to change. What she didn't know was just how profound that change would be, or the secrets that lay beneath Christian Vale's cool exterior. Secrets that would soon draw her into a dangerous game where hearts weren't the only things at stake. The week following the gallery opening passed in a blur for Zariah. Between deadlines at work and her sudden decision to attend Elliot's wedding, she barely had time to process the strange turn her life had taken. It was Friday evening when her phone rang, Christian Vale's name lighting up the screen. "I hope I'm not interrupting," his deep voice came through when she answered. "Just finishing up some work," Zariah replied, saving the code she'd been debugging. "Dedicated even on a Friday night," Christian said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "I was calling to see if you're free for dinner tomorrow. We should discuss our strategy for the wedding." Zariah hesitated. Part of her wondered if this whole plan was a mistake. Do we need a strategy? We're just two people attending a wedding. "We're not just two people," Christian said. "We're the two people Elliot Grayson least wants to see together. Trust me, this requires some planning." She couldn't argue with that. "All right, where and when?" "My place, 7 o'clock. I'll text you the address." There was a pause. "And Zariah, wear something comfortable. This isn't a business meeting." After they hung up, Zariah sat back in her chair, a strange feeling in her stomach that wasn't entirely unpleasant. She hadn't been on anything resembling a date in over a year, and she wasn't sure if this even qualified as one. Christian Vale was an enigma, powerful, intimidating, and clearly harboring a deep grudge against Elliot. But there had been moments at the gallery when she'd seen something else in him, a flicker of genuine interest, perhaps even kindness. The next evening, Zariah found herself standing outside a sleek high-rise in the most exclusive part of Boston. The doorman nodded respectfully as she gave her name. "Mr. Vale is expecting you, Miss Munro. Penthouse floor." Of course he lived in the penthouse, Zariah thought as the elevator whisked her upward. Men like Christian Vale and Elliot Grayson didn't settle for anything less than the top. When the doors opened, Christian was waiting for her, dressed in dark jeans and a simple grey sweater that somehow looked more expensive than most people's formal wear. "You came," he said, as if he'd half expected her to change her mind. "I said I would." She stepped into his apartment and tried not to look impressed, though it was difficult. The space was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city, minimalist furniture in shades of grey and blue, and walls adorned with what looked like original artwork. "Not what you expected?" Christian asked, noticing her expression. "I'm not sure what I expected," Zariah admitted. "Maybe something colder." He raised an eyebrow. "Because that's my reputation? The ice-cold rival to Elliot Grayson's fiery personality?" "Something like that." "The media loves simple narratives," he said, leading her to the kitchen where 2 glasses of wine waited. "The truth is always more complicated." As Christian prepared dinner, a simple but delicious pasta dish that he cooked himself, much to Zariah's surprise, they talked. Not about Elliot or the wedding, but about work, their backgrounds, their views on the tech industry. "Your approach to software development is fascinating," Christian said as they ate at the kitchen island. "The way you prioritize user experience over flashy features, it's exactly the opposite of what Grayson does." "Is that why you've been following my career?" Zariah asked. "Because I'm the anti-Elliot?" Christian's grey eyes met hers. "I started following your work because I heard about what he did to you, but I kept following it because you're brilliant in your own right." The compliment warmed her more than it should have. "And what about you and Elliot? The tech world has been gossiping about your rivalry for years, but no one seems to know how it started." Something dark passed over Christian's face. "That's a long story." "We have time," Zariah said gently. Christian took a long sip of his wine, then set the glass down carefully. "Elliot and I were friends once, if you can believe it. We were in the same computer science program at MIT. "You and Elliot?" Zariah couldn't hide her surprise. "Friends?" "More than friends, we were partners. We started our first company together in our senior year, a small software firm with big ambitions." Zariah felt a chill run down her spine. She had never heard this part of Elliot's history, and judging by Christian's expression, there was a good reason for that. "What happened?" she asked, though she could guess. "What always happens with Elliot Grayson," Christian said, his voice hardening. "He decided he wanted more than his share. While I was out securing our first major investor, Elliot was busy transferring our intellectual property to a new company, his company. By the time I realized what was happening, he had locked me out, and was presenting our technology as his own. The story was painfully familiar to Zariah. He stole your work. He stole everything, Christian said quietly. And then he had the audacity to offer me a job working for him. What did you do? A cold smile touched Christian's lips. I told him I'd see him again when I was buying the remains of his company for pennies on the dollar. Then I started from scratch and built Veil Industries. Zariah nodded slowly, understanding now why Christian had approached her at the gallery. They were kindred spirits in a way, both betrayed by the same man, both having fought their way back from that betrayal. So this wedding, she said, it's not just about showing up with me to make him jealous. No, Christian admitted. It's about something much more significant. What aren't you telling me, Christian? He met her gaze steadily. Elliot's company is in trouble. He's been hiding it well, but I have sources. The technology he stole from you was the last truly innovative thing Grayson Technologies produced. Since then, they've been coasting on reputation and aggressive marketing. Zariah felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and concern. And his marriage to Victoria Sinclair? A business arrangement as much as a personal one. The Sinclairs are old money with deep connections to venture capital firms. Elliot needs their backing to stay afloat. So you want to attend the wedding to... what? Watch him secure his company's future? Christian leaned forward. I want to attend because in 2 weeks, Veil Industries is going to announce a new technology that will make Grayson's main product line obsolete. His investors will pull out, the Sinclairs will realize they've backed the wrong horse, and everything he's built on lies will finally come crashing down. There was a ferocity in his voice that both attracted and alarmed Zariah. And my role in all this? Why do you need me there? Because you're the living proof of Elliot's biggest mistake, Christian said. The brilliant mind he discarded because his ego couldn't handle your success. Having you there watching as his empire begins to crumble is a poetic justice I couldn't resist. Zariah set down her fork. I agreed to go for closure, Christian, not to be a pawn in your corporate vendetta. Not a pawn, he said quickly, reaching across the table to touch her hand. A partner, like I should have had with Elliot all those years ago. His touch was warm, his grey eyes sincere in a way that made her want to believe him. But Zariah had learned the hard way to be cautious with powerful men and their grand plans. I need to think about this, she said, pulling her hand back gently. Christian nodded, respecting her space. Of course, but know that with or without you, I'm going to be at that wedding, and I'm going to watch Elliot finally face the consequences of his actions. The rest of the evening passed in lighter conversation, but Zariah couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into something much more complicated than she'd anticipated. By the time Christian called her a car to take her home, she was both drawn to him and wary of his intensity. Thank you for dinner, she said as they stood at his door. Thank you for listening, he replied. Not many people hear the real story about Elliot and me. Why tell me? Christian's eyes held hers. Because I think you understand what it's like to lose something to him and have to build yourself back up from nothing. And because, he hesitated, because I find myself wanting you to know the real me, not just the rival the media portrays. There was a vulnerability in his admission that caught Zariah off guard. She had expected calculation from Christian Veil, not honesty. Good night, Christian, she said softly. Good night, Zariah. His voice followed her into the elevator, staying with her all the way home. The following week brought an unexpected complication. Zariah was working late, focused on a particularly challenging piece of code, when her office phone rang. Zariah Monroe, she answered distractedly. So it's true. You're actually going to his wedding. The voice froze her in place. Elliot. How did you get this number? She asked, her heart racing. I own a technology company, Zariah. Getting a phone number isn't exactly difficult. His tone was casual, but she could hear the tension underneath. The question is, why are you going with him of all people? Zariah took a deep breath, steadying herself. You invited me, remember? To see what real commitment looks like. Those were your words. I didn't invite you to come with Christian Veil. Elliot's voice hardened. Do you have any idea what you're getting into with him? Probably the same thing I got into with you, she replied coolly. The difference is, I'm older now, wiser. He's using you to get to me. And what were you doing when you sent me that invitation with your little note? Zariah shot back. Being considerate of my feelings? There was a pause on the other end of the line. I never thought you'd actually come, Elliot finally said, his voice quieter, especially not with him. Well, surprise, Zariah said, surprised by her own calmness. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do. He'll hurt you, Elliot said quickly before she could hang up. Just like he thinks I hurt him. An eye for an eye. That's how Christian thinks. Goodbye, Elliot. I'll see you at your wedding. She hung up, her hands trembling slightly. Hearing his voice again had affected her more than she wanted to admit. Not because she still had feelings for him, but because it brought back the pain of their ending, the humiliation, the struggle to rebuild her career after he'd tried to destroy it. Her phone buzzed with a text message. Christian, dinner tomorrow? There are some details about the wedding we should discuss. Zariah hesitated, Elliot's warning echoing in her mind. Then she typed back, yes, but this time, I choose the place. The restaurant Zariah chose was small and unassuming, a far cry from the upscale establishments that men like Christian Vale typically frequented, but that was precisely why she'd selected it, to see how he would react to being out of his element. To her surprise, Christian seemed perfectly at ease, greeting the elderly owner by name and accepting a table in the back without a hint of displeasure. You've been here before, Zariah observed as they settled in. Many times, Christian said with a small smile. Mrs. Patel's restaurant was one of the first places I could afford to eat regularly when I was starting over after Elliot's betrayal. She used to let me sit for hours with my laptop and just one cup of tea. Once again, Christian Vale had surprised her. The man the tech world knew as ruthless and calculating had a history, connections, loyalties that ran deeper than his public image suggested. Elliot called me yesterday, she said, deciding to be direct. Christian's expression didn't change, but she noticed his hand tighten slightly around his water glass. I'm not surprised. What did he want? To warn me about you. Zariah watched his face carefully. He seems to think you're using me to get to him. And what do you think? I think there's more to this story than either of you is telling me, she said. And I think I deserve to know what I'm walking into before we show up at this wedding together. Christian was quiet for a long moment, his grey eyes studying her with an intensity that made her breath catch. You're right, he finally said. There is more. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone, tapping the screen a few times before sliding it across the table to her. It showed a news article from 5 years ago. Tech entrepreneur found dead in apparent suicide. Zariah frowned, looking up at Christian questioningly. Keep reading, he said quietly. David Chen, 28, co-founder of Meridian Systems, was found dead in his San Francisco apartment on Tuesday. Police are investigating the death as a suicide, though friends and family express shock and disbelief. David was excited about the future, said his sister, Lynn Chen. He had just secured major funding for his company and was about to announce a breakthrough technology. Sources close to the investigation report that Chen left no note, and his laptop and research files were missing from the apartment. Zariah looked up, confused. What does this have to do with Elliot? Or with us? David was my friend, Christian said, his voice low. And he wasn't just working on any technology. He was developing a security system that would have revolutionized data protection, the same system that mysteriously appeared in Grayson Technologies' product line 3 months after his death. You think Elliot? Zariah couldn't finish the sentence. I don't think Elliot killed him, if that's what you're asking, Christian said, but I do think he stole David's work and drove him to despair. It's what Elliot does. He takes what isn't his, and he doesn't care who gets hurt in the process. Zariah sat back, trying to process this new information. Why are you telling me this now? Because you're right to question my motives, Christian said, and because I want you to understand that this isn't just about business rivalry. It's about justice for David, for me, and for you. There was a sincerity in his eyes that made Zariah want to believe him, but she had been deceived by a charming, convincing man before. The technology you're announcing, she said slowly. The one that will make Grayson's products obsolete. What is it exactly? A small smile played at the corners of Christian's mouth. It's something David and I were working on together before he died. Something Elliot doesn't know about, because David kept it separate from his other projects. A security system that's not just better than what Grayson offers, it exposes the fundamental flaws in their approach. And you've been developing it all this time. In secret, yes. It's been my project of passion, you might say. Zariah nodded slowly, putting the pieces together. So attending the wedding isn't just about witnessing Elliot's reaction, it's about being there. At the moment he realizes everything he built on stolen ideas is about to come crashing down. Precisely, Christian said, reaching across the table to take her hand. This time, she didn't pull away. But I meant what I said before. I want you there, not just as a witness, but as a partner. Someone who understands exactly what kind of man Elliot Grayson really is. Their eyes met across the table, and Zariah felt something shift between them, a connection that went beyond their shared history with Elliot, beyond the plans for revenge and justice. For the first time in years, she felt truly seen by someone. "The wedding is in 3 days," she said quietly. "Yes," Christian replied, his thumb tracing small circles on the back of her hand. "Are you having second thoughts?" Zariah thought about Elliot's warning, about the complicated history between these two powerful men, about her own desire for closure. Then she looked at Christian, at the vulnerability behind his strength, the pain behind his determination. "No," she said firmly. "No second thoughts." His smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Good, because I've arranged for us to arrive in style. I want there to be no doubt in anyone's mind that we're there together." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of good food, better conversation, and a growing sense that whatever happened at Elliot's wedding would change all their lives forever. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, a perfect day for the society event of the season. Zariah stood in front of her mirror, adjusting the emerald green dress she had chosen for the occasion. It was elegant without being flashy, the color making her dark skin glow and her eyes seem even more luminous. Her phone buzzed with a text from Christian. "Car will pick you up in 30 minutes. Ready?" She took a deep breath, studying her reflection. 4 years ago, she had walked away from Elliot Grayson with nothing but her pride intact. Now she was walking back into his life as a successful woman on the arm of his greatest rival. Ready didn't begin to cover it. "Ready," she texted back. When the sleek black car pulled up outside her building, Zariah was surprised to see Christian step out to greet her. He looked devastating in a perfectly tailored dark suit, his usually severe expression softening as he took her in. "You look beautiful," he said, taking her hand. "You clean up pretty well yourself," she replied with a smile. As they drove to the Sinclair estate on the coast, Zariah found herself growing more nervous. Not about seeing Elliot again, she had made her peace with that, but about the complex web of emotions and history she was stepping into. "Second thoughts?" Christian asked, noticing her silence. "Just wondering what I've gotten myself into," she admitted. He took her hand, his touch grounding her. "Whatever happens today, we face it together. You're not alone anymore, Zariah." The simple statement hit her with unexpected force. That was what had been missing since she walked away from Elliot. Not love or success or validation, but partnership. Someone who stood beside her, not above her. The Sinclair estate came into view, a sprawling mansion overlooking the ocean. Cars lined the long driveway, and staff in formal attire directed guests to the gardens where the ceremony would take place. "Last chance to back out," Christian said, as their car joined the queue. Zariah squared her shoulders. "Not a chance." When they stepped out of the car, she felt the immediate shift in attention. Heads turned, whispers started. Christian Vale and Zariah Monroe, arriving together at Elliot Grayson's wedding. It was the kind of drama the gossip columns lived for. Christian placed his hand on the small of her back, a gesture that was both protective and possessive. As they walked toward the garden, Zariah caught sight of a familiar face, Mia, standing near the entrance with a shocked expression. "You actually came," Mia said in disbelief, her eyes darting between Zariah and Christian. "And with him, no less." "Mia, this is Christian Vale," Zariah said. "Christian, my friend Mia Chen." "A pleasure," Christian said smoothly. "Zariah has told me a lot about you." Mia raised an eyebrow. "Wish I could say the same." She turned to Zariah. "Can I talk to you for a second? Alone?" Christian nodded. "I'll go find our seats." As soon as he was out of earshot, Mia grabbed Zariah's arm. "Have you lost your mind? Do you know what people are saying about you two?" "I can imagine," Zariah said dryly. "Elliot is furious," Mia continued. "He's been on edge all morning, snapping at everyone. Victoria's family is getting concerned about his behavior." Despite herself, Zariah felt a flicker of satisfaction. "Good." Mia studied her friend's face. "This isn't just about closure, is it? You're actually falling for Christian Vale." "It's complicated," Zariah said, though she couldn't deny the truth in Mia's words. In the short time she'd known Christian, something had awakened in her, a connection she hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. "Just be careful," Mia warned. "Men like Christian and Elliot, they play by different rules than the rest of us." Before Zariah could respond, a hush fell over the gathering. She turned to see Elliot himself striding purposefully across the lawn toward them, his face set in a hard expression that she knew all too well. "Zariah," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "I need to speak with you. Now." Christian appeared at her side as if summoned. "Is there a problem, Elliot?" Surely the groom has other things to attend to on his wedding day. The two men faced each other, the years of hatred and rivalry crackling between them like electricity. Zariah felt dozens of eyes on them, the other guests sensing the drama unfolding. "This doesn't concern you, Vale," Elliot said coldly. "Anything that concerns Zariah concerns me," Christian replied, his hand finding hers and gripping it firmly. Elliot's eyes flicked to their joined hands, then back to Zariah's face. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." Zariah hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes. Christian looked like he wanted to object, but he respected her decision. "I'll be right here," he said, letting go of her hand reluctantly. As Elliot led her away from the crowd, toward a small gazebo overlooking the ocean, Zariah felt a strange sense of déjà vu. Once again she was following Elliot Grayson, unsure of what awaited her. But this time, she wasn't the same woman who had walked out of his office 4 years ago. This time she was ready for whatever came next. The gazebo overlooking the ocean offered a deceptive tranquility, far removed from the wedding preparations buzzing behind them. Zariah crossed her arms as Elliot paced in front of her, his expensive shoes scuffing against the wooden floor. "What are you doing, Zariah?" he finally asked, turning to face her. "With him? Of all people?" "I could ask you the same thing," she replied calmly. "Inviting me to your wedding with that nasty little note. What was that supposed to accomplish?" Elliot had the grace to look momentarily ashamed. "I was angry when I wrote that. I'd just heard you were working on a new security protocol, one that could compete with ours." "So this was about business?" Zariah laughed bitterly. "Of course it was. It's always business with you, Elliot." "Not everything." He stepped closer, his blue eyes softening in a way that once would have made her heart race. "I've missed you, Zariah, more than I thought possible." "Don't." She held up a hand, stopping him in his tracks. "You're getting married today, to Victoria." "A mistake," he said quickly. "I see that now." Zariah stared at him in disbelief. "You can't be serious." "Dead serious." Elliot moved closer, lowering his voice. "It's not too late. We could leave right now, just walk away from all of this." "And what about Victoria, your guests? The Sinclair family's connections that your company so desperately needs?" He flinched at her last words. "How did you—" "Christian told me," she said, "about your company's troubles. About how you need this marriage to keep your investors from pulling out." Anger flashed in Elliot's eyes. "And you believe him? The man has been trying to destroy me for years." "I believe what I see," Zariah replied. "And what I see is you, on your wedding day, trying to manipulate me instead of facing your responsibilities. This isn't manipulation." He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "I made a mistake, Zariah. I never should have let you go." For a moment, looking into his familiar face, Zariah felt a whisper of what they once had. The passion, the connection, the shared ambition. But then she remembered the cruelty of their ending, the years of struggle that followed, and the man waiting for her just a short distance away. "Your 5 minutes are up," she said, stepping around him. Elliot caught her arm. "He's using you, Zariah. Whatever he's told you, whatever he's made you feel, it's all part of his plan to get to me. Let go of me, Elliot." Her voice was steel. "Not until you hear me out. Vale has a vendetta against me that goes beyond business. He blames me for his friend's suicide, David Chen. He thinks I stole David's work and drove him to kill himself." Zariah froze. "Did you?" Elliot's grip on her arm loosened. "It wasn't like that. David came to me, offered me his technology, said he was in trouble, needed money fast. So you took advantage of his desperation?" Zariah pulled her arm free, disgust rising in her throat. "I paid him what he asked," Elliot defended. "How was I supposed to know he was in deeper trouble than he let on? That wasn't on me." "Everything is never on you, is it, Elliot?" Zariah shook her head. "That's your problem. You take, and when people get hurt, you find a way to make it someone else's fault." A flash of genuine pain crossed his face. "Is that what you think of me? After everything we shared? I think you're about to marry a woman you don't love to save your company," Zariah said. "And I think you'd drop her in a heartbeat if something better came along. That's who you are, Elliot. That's who you've always been." She turned to leave, but his next words stopped her cold. "Ask Christian about the fire at my research facility last year," he said. "Ask him where he was the night it happened." Zariah turned back slowly. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying his vendetta against me has gone beyond business," Elliot replied, his voice low and urgent. 3 people were hospitalized in that fire, Zariah. One of them still hasn't fully recovered." Before she could respond, a staff member appeared at the gazebo entrance. "Mr. Grayson, they're ready for you." The ceremony will begin in 10 minutes. Elliot nodded, then turned back to Zariah. Be careful who you trust, he said quietly. Some wounds run too deep to ever heal. Zariah watched him walk away, his words echoing in her mind. Was Christian capable of what Elliot was suggesting? The man she'd come to know in the past 2 weeks seemed passionate, determined, but not violent. Yet there was an intensity to him, a darkness when he spoke of Elliot that hinted at depths she hadn't yet explored. By the time she rejoined the wedding guests, the orchestra was playing softly, and everyone was being seated for the ceremony. Christian was waiting for her, concern evident in his grey eyes. "Everything okay?" he asked as she took her seat beside him in the back row. "Fine," she said, not quite meeting his gaze. "Just Elliot being Elliot." Christian studied her face for a moment, as if sensing there was more, but he didn't press. Instead, he took her hand, his thumb brushing soothingly over her knuckles. The simple gesture calmed her racing thoughts. The wedding ceremony began with all the pomp one would expect from a union of wealth and power. Victoria Sinclair appeared in a gown that probably cost more than Zariah's annual salary, her blonde hair arranged in an elegant updo beneath a delicate veil. As Elliot took his place at the altar, his eyes scanned the crowd until they found Zariah. Even from a distance, she could read the message in them. It's not too late. You could still stop this. She looked away, focusing instead on the weight of Christian's hand in hers, the solid presence of him beside her. Whatever game Elliot was playing, she refused to be a part of it. The ceremony proceeded with picture-perfect precision, vows exchanged, rings presented, a kiss that looked convincing enough for the society photographers stationed at strategic points around the garden. Through it all, Zariah maintained a carefully neutral expression, even as she felt Elliot's gaze repeatedly finding her. "You're doing great," Christian whispered as the newlyweds walked back down the aisle, Victoria beaming and Elliot wearing the practiced smile of a man who had closed a successful business deal. "I don't know what I expected to feel," Zariah admitted as they joined the procession to the reception tent. "But it wasn't this. What are you feeling?" Christian's arm slipped around her waist, protective and steady. She considered the question. "Nothing," she realized. "I thought I'd feel anger or sadness or even relief, but I feel nothing for him anymore." Christian's smile was genuine. "That's called closure, Zariah. That's what you came for." The reception was a lavish affair, with champagne flowing freely and a band playing soft jazz as guests mingled among tables adorned with elaborate floral arrangements. Zariah and Christian found their assigned seats at a table far from the bridal party, a deliberate placement, no doubt. "Typical Elliot," Christian observed with a dry smile. "Close enough to witness his triumph, far enough to feel excluded." "I'm surprised he seated us together," Zariah said, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. "That was probably Victoria's doing," a voice said from behind them. They turned to see Mia approaching, her expression a mixture of amusement and concern. She insisted on following the seating chart exactly as planned, even after he found out you two were coming together. "How do you know that?" Zariah asked. Mia grinned. "I may have overheard a heated discussion between them this morning. The walls in this place aren't as thick as the Sinclairs might think." As the evening progressed, Zariah found herself relaxing despite the strange circumstances. Christian proved to be an attentive companion, keeping her glass filled, engaging easily with the other guests at their table, and occasionally whispering comments in her ear that made her laugh. It was during one such moment, her head tilted toward him as she smiled at something he'd said, that Zariah noticed Victoria watching them from across the room. The bride's expression was difficult to read, not jealousy exactly, but something close to it, curiosity perhaps, or envy. "I think you've made an impression on the new Mrs. Grayson," Christian murmured, following her gaze. "I think she's wondering if she made the right choice," Zariah replied. As if on cue, the band announced that it was time for the first dance. Elliot led Victoria onto the dance floor, one hand at her waist, the other clasping hers as they moved gracefully to a romantic ballad. They made a striking couple, both blonde, both beautiful, both born to privilege and power. Yet watching them, Zariah felt a strange sense of pity. There was no spark between them, no genuine connection visible in the way they moved together. It was a performance, perfectly executed but lacking heart. "Dance with me," Christian said suddenly, standing and offering his hand as the song ended, and other couples began joining the newlyweds on the dance floor. Zariah hesitated only briefly before taking his hand. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" "Probably not," he admitted with a smile that transformed his severe features, "but I've wanted to hold you in my arms all day." The simple honesty of his words sent a flush of warmth through her. As they moved onto the dance floor, Christian drew her close, one hand at the small of her back, the other holding hers against his chest. Unlike Elliot and Victoria's choreographed performance, this felt real, a natural connection that required no thought, no planning. "You're full of surprises, Christian Vale," Zariah said as they swayed to the music. "I didn't take you for a dancer. There's a lot you don't know about me yet," he replied, his grey eyes holding hers. "Like what happened at Elliot's research facility last year." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Christian's step faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. "He told you about that, did he? He said there was a fire, that people were hurt." A muscle twitched in Christian's jaw, and he implied I had something to do with it. "Did you?" The directness of her question seemed to surprise him. They continued to dance, moving slowly among the other couples as he considered his answer. "I was in Tokyo the night of the fire," he finally said. "You can check the flight records, hotel registrations. I had nothing to do with it." Relief washed over Zariah, followed immediately by shame for having doubted him. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have asked." "Yes, you should have," Christian said firmly. "Elliot and I have a complicated history, and you have every right to question what you're getting involved in." His hand tightened slightly at her waist. "But I swear to you, Zariah, I would never endanger innocent people. That's not who I am." The conviction in his voice convinced her more than any evidence could have. Whatever darkness Christian carried, whatever vendetta he nursed against Elliot, he had lines he wouldn't cross. "I believe you," she said softly. Something shifted in his expression, a vulnerability breaking through his usual controlled demeanor. Before he could respond, however, the music changed, and a familiar voice spoke from behind them. "Mind if I cut in?" Elliot stood there, handsome in his wedding suit, a polite smile on his face that didn't reach his eyes. Christian's arm tightened around Zariah. "Actually, it's fine," Zariah interrupted, placing a calming hand on Christian's chest. "One dance won't kill me." The look Christian gave her was filled with concern, but he stepped back, allowing Elliot to take his place. "I'll be right over there," he said, nodding toward their table. As Elliot's hand settled on her waist, Zariah maintained a careful distance between them, nothing like the closeness she had shared with Christian moments before. "You two seem cozy," Elliot observed, his tone casual, though his eyes were anything but. "What do you want, Elliot? Shouldn't you be dancing with your wife?" "Victoria's dancing with her father," he replied. "Besides, I wanted to see if you'd thought about what I said earlier." Zariah sighed. "I have, and I've decided it doesn't matter. The past is the past." "Is it?" Elliot's blue eyes searched hers. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're repeating it, trusting the wrong man, getting pulled into something you don't fully understand." "The difference is I'm not the same woman I was 4 years ago," Zariah said. "I know what I want now, and I know what I don't want." A flash of hurt crossed Elliot's face, quickly masked by a sardonic smile. "And what is it you want, Zariah? Christian Vale? The man's incapable of love. All he cares about is revenge." "You don't know him," she said, though a small part of her wondered if there was any truth to Elliot's words. "I know him better than anyone," Elliot countered. "We were like brothers once. I know exactly what drives him, what he's capable of." Before Zariah could respond, a commotion near the entrance to the reception tent caught their attention. Her man in a security uniform was speaking urgently to one of the wedding planners, who then hurried over to where Victoria was dancing with her father. "What's going on?" Zariah asked, noticing the sudden tension in Elliot's posture. "I don't know," he said, already moving toward his bride. Zariah made her way back to Christian, who was watching the scene unfold with an unreadable expression. "Something's happening," she said as she reached him. Christian nodded, his eyes fixed on Elliot, who was now in deep conversation with Victoria and the security guard. "It's starting," he said quietly. "What is?" Before he could answer, Victoria's father stepped forward, addressing the guests with a forced smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, please continue enjoying yourselves. We're experiencing a minor security issue that's being handled as we speak." But the atmosphere had already changed, the carefree celebration giving way to concerned murmurs, as guests speculated about what might be happening. Elliot broke away from the group, moving purposefully toward the exit. As he passed their table, he shot Christian a look of pure hatred. "What did you do?" Zariah asked, a chill running down her spine at the intensity of the exchange. "Nothing yet," Christian replied. He checked his watch. "But in about 5 minutes, the first news alerts will start coming in about a major security breach at Grayson Technologies. By tomorrow morning, Every tech publication in the country will be reporting that their flagship security system has catastrophic vulnerabilities. Zariah stared at him. You planned this to happen during his wedding. Poetic timing, don't you think? There was a coldness in Christian's voice that she hadn't heard before. The day he celebrates his perfect life is the day it all starts to unravel. This isn't just business anymore, is it? She said, remembering Elliot's warning. This is personal. Christian's grey eyes met hers. It's always been personal, Zariah. From the moment he betrayed me, from the day David died, it's been personal. A buzz of activity near the head table drew their attention. Victoria was on her phone, her face pale as she listened to whoever was on the other end. Around the tent, other guests were checking their phones as well, the news apparently spreading faster than Christian had anticipated. We should go, he said, standing and offering Zariah his hand. This is going to get ugly, and you don't need to be in the middle of it. She hesitated, looking around at the wedding that was rapidly descending into chaos. Is this really what you wanted? To ruin their day? I wanted justice, Christian said simply. For myself, for David, and for you. The sincerity in his voice pulled at something deep inside Zariah. Despite the calculated cruelty of his timing, she understood the need for closure, for setting things right after years of carrying the burden of someone else's betrayal. She took his hand, allowing him to lead her toward the exit. As they passed Victoria, the bride looked up, her eyes locking with Zariah's for a moment. There was no anger in her gaze, only a sudden, stark realization, the understanding that she had married a man whose past was now violently colliding with his present. Zariah felt a pang of sympathy for her. Victoria Sinclair hadn't asked to be caught in the crossfire of this long-standing feud. Victoria, she said, pausing despite Christian's gentle tug on her hand. I'm sorry. The blonde woman straightened, dignity replacing the shock on her face. For what? You didn't cause this. No, Zariah agreed, but I could have warned you about who you were marrying. A sad smile touched Victoria's lips. I knew who he was, she said quietly. I just thought I could change him. The two women shared a moment of understanding. Both had seen something in Elliot Grayson worth loving, and both had learned the hard way that love wasn't enough to change a man who valued power above all else. Outside, the evening air was cool against Zariah's skin as Christian led her to his car. Behind them, the Sinclair estate was a flurry of activity. Guests departing early, security personnel rushing in, the perfect society wedding dissolving into a PR nightmare. Are you angry with me? Christian asked as they reached his car. Zariah considered the question. I don't know what I am, she admitted. Part of me understands why you did this. Another part wonders if revenge is ever worth the collateral damage. He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. I've waited years for this moment, he said, his voice intense. Planned for it, worked toward it. But now that it's happening, all I can think about is whether I've ruined any chance I had with you. The unexpected vulnerability in his confession caught Zariah off guard. Is that what you want? A chance with me? More than I've wanted anything in a long time, Christian said, lifting one hand to gently touch her cheek. You weren't part of the plan, Zariah. You were supposed to be a means to an end, a way to make Elliot's humiliation complete. But somewhere along the way... What? She prompted when he hesitated. I fell for you, he admitted. The real you, brilliant, resilient, compassionate, even when you have every reason not to be. Zariah felt her heart racing. Despite everything, the complicated history, the revenge plot, the chaos they were leaving behind, she couldn't deny the connection that had grown between them. I need time, she said, to process all of this. Christian nodded, his expression solemn. I understand. I'll take you home. The drive back to the city was quiet, both lost in their thoughts as the coastline receded behind them. It was only when they were halfway to Boston that Zariah's phone began buzzing with notifications. It's happening, she said, scrolling through the alerts. Every tech site is reporting the security breach. Grayson Technologies stock is already falling in after-hours trading. Christian's hands tightened on the steering wheel. By morning, it will be in freefall. The Sinclair family will pull their support when they realize what they've invested in, and Elliot will have to face the fact that his entire empire is built on stolen ideas and false promises. And then what? Zariah asked. What happens after you've destroyed him? The question seemed to catch him off guard. I don't know, he admitted. I've been focused on this moment for so long. I haven't thought much beyond it. That's the problem with revenge, Zariah said softly. It consumes everything else until there's nothing left when it's finally done. Christian glanced at her, a troubled expression crossing his face. Is that what you think I am? Consumed? I think you're more than your vendetta against Elliot, she said, but I'm not sure you believe that yet. They lapsed into silence again, the weight of her words hanging between them. When they finally reached her apartment building, Christian insisted on walking her to her door, though the tension between them made the short journey feel much longer. Thank you for today, Zariah said as they reached her door. Despite everything, I'm glad I went. I needed to see him to face that part of my past in order to move forward. And have you? Christian asked, his grey eyes searching hers. Moved forward? She nodded slowly. I think I have. Seeing Elliot today, I realized something. He doesn't have power over me anymore. Neither his love nor his hate can touch me now. A small smile touched Christian's lips. Good. That's what I wanted for you. Freedom from him. And what about you? She asked. Are you free now that your plan is in motion? He didn't answer immediately, his expression thoughtful. I don't know, he finally said. But I want to be. The honesty in his voice moved her. Impulsively, Zariah leaned up and pressed a soft kiss to his cheek. Good night, Christian. His hand caught hers as she turned toward her door. Zariah, he said, his voice low and urgent. I know I've given you every reason to doubt me, but I meant what I said earlier. My feelings for you are real, separate from everything with Elliot. She looked into his eyes, searching for the truth. Prove it, she whispered, not with words, but with what you do next. With that, she slipped inside her apartment, closing the door gently behind her. Through the peephole, she watched him stand there for a long moment, conflict evident in his expression, before he finally turned and walked away. Zariah leaned against the door, her emotions a tangled mess. She believed Christian when he said his feelings for her were real. She had seen the truth of it in his eyes, felt it in his touch. But she also knew that revenge could warp even the purest intentions, turning justice into cruelty, righteous anger into destructive rage. The question now was whether Christian could move beyond the vendetta that had driven him for so long, and whether she was willing to help him try. Exhausted, Zariah kicked off her heels and made her way to her bedroom. She was about to change out of her dress when her phone rang. An unknown number. Hello? She answered cautiously. Ms. Monroe. A woman's voice came through, professional and clipped. This is Detective Sarah Jensen with the Boston Police Department. I'm sorry to disturb you so late, but we need to speak with you regarding an incident at Grayson Technologies earlier this evening. Zariah felt her blood run cold. What kind of incident? I'm not at liberty to discuss details over the phone, the detective replied, but we'd like you to come to the station as soon as possible. We have some questions about your relationship with Christian Vale. Has something happened to him? Zariah asked, her heart racing. Mr. Vale is fine, Detective Jensen assured her, but he's been brought in for questioning regarding a cyber attack on Grayson Technologies that occurred tonight. Your name came up during our preliminary investigation. Zariah sank onto her bed, her mind spinning. I'll be there in 30 minutes, she said, already reaching for her keys. After hanging up, she sat for a moment, trying to make sense of what was happening. The security breach Christian had orchestrated was supposed to be an exposure of vulnerabilities, not an actual attack. Had he gone further than he'd admitted to her? As she changed into more practical clothes, Zariah's eye caught on her purse, still sitting where she'd dropped it when they returned from the wedding. On impulse, she picked it up and emptied its contents onto her bed, searching for, she wasn't sure what. Among the scattered items was a small silver key she didn't recognize. Frowning, she picked it up, turning it over in her hand. It wasn't hers, which meant it must have been slipped into her purse at some point during the day. On the key's head was a logo she recognized immediately, the stylized G of Grayson Technologies. With trembling fingers, Zariah reached for her phone again, intending to call Christian. But as she unlocked the screen, she noticed a text message from an unknown number, sent just minutes after Christian had left her at her door. Car key in your purse. Password to glove compartment. DVCT 2019. What you need is inside. Trust no one, not even me. Zariah stared at the message, a chill running down her spine. What had Christian gotten her involved in? And what was in his car that was so important he'd take such precautions to ensure she found it? Only one way to find out. Grabbing a jacket, Zariah hurried out of her apartment and down to the street where Christian had parked earlier. The sleek black car was still there, looking out of place among the more modest vehicles that lined her neighborhood. The key worked, unlocking the driver's side door with a soft click. Zariah slid into the seat, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure someone would hear it. The glove compartment had a digital keypad into which she carefully entered the code from the text, DVCT 2019. It opened to reveal a single manila envelope. Inside was a photograph, old, slightly faded, but clear enough to make out three young men standing together, arms around each other's shoulders, grinning at the camera. She recognized two of them immediately, Christian and Elliot, much younger, probably in college. The third man she didn't know, but given the context, she guessed it was David Chen. What caught her attention, however, wasn't the image itself, but what was written on the back in faded blue ink, the Three Musketeers. MIT Hackathon Champions 2009. The DVCT algorithm lives. DVCT, the same letters as the password to the glove compartment. Beneath the photograph was a flash drive and a handwritten note in Christian's precise handwriting. Zariah, if you're reading this, things haven't gone as planned. The truth about David is more complicated than I told you. He didn't kill himself. The official ruling was suicide, but the evidence never added up. I've been gathering proof for years, and it's all on this drive. David, Elliot, and I created the DVCT security algorithm together in college. It was supposed to change the world. Instead, it got David killed. I thought exposing the flaws in Grayson's security would be justice, but I was wrong. The real justice is on this drive. Be careful. They'll come for you next. Zariah's hands shook as she stared at the note. This went far beyond corporate rivalry or stolen technology. This was suggesting murder. A sharp rap on the window made her jump. Detective Jensen stood outside, flanked by two uniformed officers. "Ms. Monroe," she said, as Zariah rolled down the window, "I'm going to have to ask you to step out of the vehicle." Zariah clutched the flash drive tightly in her palm. "Is Christian okay?" Something flickered across the detective's face. Concern, or maybe pity. "Mr. Vale was released from questioning an hour ago. His car was seen leaving the city, heading north. We've been unable to reach him since." "I don't understand," Zariah said, even as a sinking feeling told her she was beginning to understand all too well. "Neither do we," Detective Jensen replied, "but we're hoping you can help us figure it out, starting with why you're in his car and what that is in your hand." As Zariah stepped out of the car, the weight of the flash drive in her palm felt like the heaviest burden she had ever carried. Whatever was on it had sent Christian running, and now it had led the police straight to her. The photograph of the three young men, Christian, Elliot, and David, kept flashing in her mind. Three friends who had created something together, only for it to tear them apart in the most devastating way possible. And somehow, without knowing it, she had become the key to unlocking a truth that had been buried for years. A truth that could destroy not just Elliot Grayson, but everyone connected to him, including her. The interview room at the Boston Police Department was cold and sterile, with harsh fluorescent lighting that made Zariah's eyes hurt after 2 hours of questioning. Detective Jensen sat across from her, a cup of lukewarm coffee between them. "Let's go through this one more time," Jensen said, her tone professional but tired. "You met Christian Vale 2 weeks ago at an art gallery." "Yes," Zariah confirmed. "He approached me because he knew about my history with Elliot Grayson, and he invited you to attend Grayson's wedding with him." "That's right." "As what? His date? His accomplice?" Jensen raised an eyebrow. Zariah sighed. "It wasn't like that. He said it would be a way for both of us to get closure." "Closure," Jensen repeated skeptically. "Yet according to your statement, Mr. Vale also told you he planned to announce a security breach in Grayson Technologies' systems during the wedding. He said he was going to reveal vulnerabilities in their security protocol," Zariah clarified, "not actually attack their systems." Jensen flipped open a folder on the table. "Well, what happened last night went far beyond revealing vulnerabilities. Someone gained access to Grayson's servers and downloaded terabytes of proprietary data, client information, financial records, unreleased products, everything." Zariah felt a chill run through her. This was more than Christian had admitted to her. "I didn't know about that," she said honestly. "What about this?" Jensen slid the photograph of Christian, Elliot, and David across the table. "Or the flash drive you were holding when we found you in Vale's car. I told you I just found those. Christian left me a message to look in his car. A message that conveniently disappeared from your phone," Jensen noted. "I didn't delete it," Zariah insisted. "It must have been remotely wiped." Jensen studied her for a long moment. "Ms. Monroe, I'm trying to give you the benefit of the doubt here, but you have to understand how this looks. You're found in possession of evidence related to a major cybercrime immediately after attending the victim's wedding with the prime suspect, who has now disappeared. Zariah leaned forward. Have you looked at what's on the flash drive? Our tech team is analyzing it now, Jensen replied. But I'm more interested in where Christian Vale might have gone and what else he might have planned. I don't know where he is, Zariah said, frustration creeping into her voice. We've been over this a dozen times. Before Jensen could respond, there was a knock at the door. A young officer entered and whispered something in the detective's ear. Jensen's expression changed from skeptical to surprised. Wait here, she told Zariah, rising and following the officer out. Alone in the interview room, Zariah closed her eyes, trying to make sense of everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. The wedding, Christian's revelation about his plan, the cryptic message leading her to the photograph and flash drive, it all pointed to something much bigger than corporate rivalry or stolen technology. The door opened again, and Jensen returned with a man Zariah didn't recognize. Tall African-American, with silver at his temples, and the sharp eyes of someone who missed nothing. Ms. Monroe, this is Special Agent Marcus Harris with the FBI, Jensen said, her tone noticeably different. He'd like to speak with you. Actually, Agent Harris said, I'm here to release Ms. Monroe into federal custody. This case has just been classified as a matter of national security. Zariah stared at him in confusion. National security? What are you talking about? Harris offered a thin smile. All will be explained, Ms. Monroe, but not here. Am I under arrest? She asked, suddenly fearful. No, Harris assured her, but we do need your cooperation, and time is of the essence. The federal building in downtown Boston was a massive structure of glass and steel, its upper floors offering a panoramic view of the city. Zariah sat in a conference room on the 15th floor, a fresh cup of coffee in front of her as she waited for Agent Harris to return. When the door finally opened, she was stunned to see not only Harris, but Christian Vale, looking tired but unharmed. Christian! She stood, relief flooding through her, followed immediately by confusion and anger. What's going on? Where have you been? I'm sorry, Zariah, he said, his grey eyes troubled. I never meant for you to get caught up in this. In what exactly? She demanded. The police think you hacked into Elliot's company. They said you disappeared. Harris cleared his throat. Perhaps I can shed some light on the situation. He gestured for them both to sit. Mr. Vale has been working with us for the past several years as part of an ongoing investigation into corporate espionage and potential national security breaches at Grayson Technologies. Zariah sank back into her chair, stunned. You're a federal informant? Not exactly, Christian said. More like a concerned citizen with a personal stake in the investigation. The flash drive you found in Mr. Vale's car contains evidence we've been trying to obtain for years, Harris explained. Proof that Elliot Grayson has been selling advanced security algorithms to foreign entities, including several that are under international sanctions. The DVCT algorithm, Zariah murmured, remembering the inscription on the back of the photograph. Christian nodded. David Vale Chen Thompson, our last names. We created it together at MIT, a security protocol that was supposed to be unbreakable. The Three Musketeers, we called ourselves. What happened? Zariah asked softly. Christian's expression darkened. Elliot saw an opportunity to make a fortune. He wanted to license the algorithm to the highest bidder, regardless of who they were or what they might use it for. David and I refused. We had designed it to protect people, not to be weaponized. So Elliot stole it, Zariah guessed, the pattern all too familiar. He did more than that, Harris interjected. He modified it, creating backdoors that only he knew about. Then he started selling those backdoors to anyone who could pay, all while presenting the algorithm as completely secure. David found out, Christian continued, his voice tight with old pain. He confronted Elliot, threatened to expose what he was doing. A week later, he was dead. The official ruling was suicide, Harris said, but the circumstances were suspicious. No note, missing personal effects, and the timing. We couldn't prove anything, Christian added. But I knew. I just knew Elliot was responsible one way or another, so I started building my case, gathering evidence. And the FBI recruited you, Zariah said, putting the pieces together. They approached me 3 years ago, Christian confirmed. They'd been monitoring Grayson's international transactions and needed someone on the inside of the tech community who could help them understand what they were seeing. Zariah turned to Harris. And the attack on Grayson Technologies last night. A controlled operation, Harris replied. We needed access to certain files that would prove the connection between Grayson and several shell companies he's been using to disguise his dealings with sanctioned entities. The wedding was just convenient timing, Christian added, a hint of his old coldness returning. I won't pretend I didn't enjoy watching his perfect day fall apart. And what about me? Zariah asked, anger flaring. Was I just part of your cover, a way to get closer to Elliot? Pain flashed across Christian's face. At first, yes, he admitted. When I approached you at the gallery, it was because I knew your presence at the wedding would distract Elliot, make him careless. So you used me, she said flatly. I did, Christian acknowledged. But Zariah, what happened between us? What's still happening? That's real. I never planned on feeling this way about you. Harris cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. Perhaps I should give you two a moment. After he left, silence filled the room. Zariah stared out the window at the Boston skyline, trying to process everything she'd just learned. You could have told me the truth, she finally said. I wanted to, Christian replied. But the fewer people who knew about the investigation, the safer everyone was. Elliot Grayson is not a man who hesitates to remove obstacles from his path. Zariah turned to face him. Did he kill David? Christian's expression was grim. I can't prove it, but the evidence on that flash drive strongly suggests he arranged it. David had documentation of the back doors, proof of who Elliot was selling to. He never got a chance to release it. And you've been carrying this all these years, Zariah said softly. The suspicion, the guilt of not being able to protect your friend. It's been my driving force, Christian admitted. Maybe to an unhealthy degree. Agent Harris has told me more than once that my personal feelings for Elliot could compromise the investigation. Is that why you disappeared last night? Because the FBI thought you'd gone too far? Christian nodded. The plan was to access specific files only, but when I saw what was in Grayson's system, all the evidence of his dealings, his betrayals, I wanted to download everything. Harris pulled me out before I could compromise the legal case they're building. And now what happens? Now we wait, Christian said. The evidence is being processed. Warrants are being prepared. By this time tomorrow, Elliot Grayson will be in federal custody. Zariah absorbed this, trying to imagine Elliot, arrogant, entitled Elliot, in handcuffs, facing charges. It didn't seem real. What about us? She asked, voicing the question that had been hovering between them. Christian's eyes softened. That depends on you. I've kept secrets, used our connection for my own purposes. I wouldn't blame you if you walked away right now. You're right, I should, Zariah said. But I understand why you did what you did. I know what it's like to be betrayed by Elliot, to have him take something precious from you. She paused. What I don't know is who you are without this vendetta. Who is Christian Vale when he's not consumed by bringing down Elliot Grayson? A small, sad smile touched his lips. I'm not sure I know either. It's been so long. Maybe it's time to find out, she suggested. Before Christian could respond, the door opened, and Agent Harris returned, his expression grave. We have a problem, he announced. Elliot Grayson just boarded a private jet at Logan Airport. He's heading to a country with no extradition treaty with the United States. Victoria? Christian asked. Not with him, Harris replied. Apparently he left her at their hotel this morning with barely an explanation. He knows, Zariah realized. He figured out you were working with the FBI. Harris nodded. It appears someone tipped him off. We have about 30 minutes before his plane is cleared for takeoff. Can't you stop it? Zariah asked. We're working on it, Harris said. But the Sinclair family has significant political connections. There are calls being made, pressure being applied to let the plane depart. Christian stood, determination in his eyes. I need to talk to him. That's not happening, Harris said firmly. You're too close to this, Vale. He'll listen to me, Zariah said suddenly, surprising herself as much as the two men. I can get him to delay the flight, give you time to arrange an interception. Absolutely not, Christian objected. It's too dangerous. She might be right, Harris said thoughtfully. Grayson has a blind spot when it comes to Ms. Monroe. He reached out to her at the wedding, tried to win her back even on his own wedding day. How do you know that? Zariah asked. We had the place under surveillance, Harris explained. Standard procedure when we're monitoring a subject of interest. Christian took Zariah's hands in his. I can't ask you to do this. You're not asking, she replied. I'm offering. This is my chance for real closure, not just walking away from Elliot, but helping to bring him to justice. After a tense discussion, Harris agreed to the plan. They would get Zariah to the airport, where she would try to convince Elliot to delay his departure just long enough for the FBI to cut through the red tape and ground the plane. Be careful, Christian said as they prepared to leave. Elliot is desperate now, and desperate men are unpredictable. I know him, Zariah assured him. I know how to handle him. The private terminal at Logan Airport was a world away from the crowded chaos of commercial aviation. Sleek, quiet, and exclusive, it catered to those for whom money was no object, and privacy was paramount. Zariah approached the security desk with the confidence of someone who belonged there. "I'm here to see Elliot Grayson," she said. "He's expecting me." The guard looked skeptical. "Mr. Grayson's flight is preparing for departure. He left strict instructions not to be disturbed." "Tell him Zariah Monroe is here," she insisted. "Trust me, he'll want to see me." After a brief phone call, the guard's demeanor changed. Through those doors and to the right, the Sinclair family's private lounge. Zariah took a deep breath before pushing through the doors. In her ear, a tiny communications device kept her connected to Christian and Agent Harris, who were monitoring from a van in the parking lot. "We've got you," Christian's voice reassured her. "Harris says we need 15 more minutes to get the ground stop authorized." The private lounge was opulent, with leather seating, a fully stocked bar, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the tarmac, where a sleek private jet waited. Elliot stood at the window, still in his wedding suit from the day before, though it was now rumpled and his tie was loose around his neck. "I have to admit, I'm surprised," he said without turning. "I didn't think you'd come." "You're running," Zariah said, keeping her voice neutral. "That's not like you, Elliot." He turned then, and she was shocked by his appearance. The handsome, confident man she had known was gone, replaced by someone with bloodshot eyes and a haggard expression. "What choice do I have?" he asked. "By now you've seen what's on the flash drive. You know what Vale is trying to do to me." "What the FBI is trying to do," Zariah corrected. "Christian is working with them." Elliot laughed bitterly. "Of course he is. The righteous Christian Vale, always so morally superior." He moved to the bar and poured himself a drink. "Did he tell you about David?" "He told me enough," Zariah said, carefully moving further into the room, putting herself between Elliot and the door to the tarmac. "He told me you stole the algorithm you three created together, that you sold backdoor access to people who shouldn't have had it." "Business is business," Elliot said dismissively. "David was naive. He thought we could change the world with our technology. He never understood that the world doesn't want to be changed. It wants to be controlled." "And David's death," Zariah asked. "Was that business too?" Something flashed in Elliot's eyes. Pain, perhaps, or guilt. "I never wanted David to die. He was my friend." "But you didn't stop it either," Zariah guessed. "You knew what would happen if he exposed what you were doing." Elliot took a long drink, avoiding her gaze. "I made some deals with people who don't tolerate threats to their security. When David started making noise about going public with what he knew," he shrugged, "I may have mentioned my concerns to certain interested parties. What they chose to do with that information wasn't my decision." Zariah felt sick. The Elliot she had once loved was truly gone, replaced by this shell of a man who could rationalize his role in his friend's death. 10 more minutes, Christian's voice came through her earpiece. "Keep him talking." "What about us?" Zariah asked, moving to sit on one of the leather couches. "Was that just business too?" Elliot's expression softened. "No. What we had was real, Zariah. At least it was for me. Until I threatened your control," she pointed out. "Just like David did." "You were different," he insisted, sitting beside her. "I loved you. I still do." "Then prove it," Zariah said, meeting his eyes. "Turn yourself in, make this right." Elliot laughed, a hollow sound that held no humor. "It's too late for that. Do you have any idea who I've been dealing with? These aren't people who forgive and forget, the moment they think I've become a liability." "We can protect you," Zariah said. "The FBI can offer witness protection, immunity in exchange for your testimony." For a moment, she thought she saw a flicker of hope in his eyes. Then his gaze shifted to something beyond her shoulder, and his expression hardened. "It was never going to be that simple," he said quietly. Zariah turned to see what he was looking at. Through the window, 2 men in suits were approaching the plane, speaking with the pilot. "Elliot, what's happening?" she asked, a sense of dread washing over her. "My insurance policy," he replied, finishing his drink. "I always have one, you know. It's how I've survived this long." The 2 men entered the lounge, their expressions blank, professional. One nodded respectfully to Elliot. "Mr. Grayson, the plane is ready." Elliot stood. "Thank you, James. And the other matter we discussed?" "Being handled as we speak," the man replied, his eyes flicking briefly to Zariah. "Something's wrong," Christian's voice came urgently through her earpiece. "There's movement around the van. I think we've been—" The transmission cut off, replaced by static. "What did you do?" Zariah demanded, rising to her feet. "Survival requires sacrifice," Elliot said. a genuine sadness in his voice. "I'm sorry it had to be this way, Zariah. I really did hope we could have another chance." The men moved toward her, and Zariah backed away, looking desperately for an escape route. Her mind raced, trying to process what was happening. Elliot had known they were coming. He had been prepared. "You don't have to do this," she said, addressing the men. "The FBI is already on their way. Whatever he's paying you, it's not worth it." "Ms. Monroe," the one called James said politely, "we're not here to harm you. You're coming with us." "As leverage," Elliot explained. "Insurance that Vale and his FBI friends don't try anything foolish while we're in the air." Zariah felt cold fear grip her heart. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. They were supposed to delay Elliot, not become his hostages. "You won't get away with this," she said, though the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. Elliot smiled sadly. "I already have, Zariah. I always do." A commotion outside the lounge drew everyone's attention. Shouts, the sound of running feet, and then the doors burst open. Agent Harris led a team of armed FBI agents into the room, weapons drawn. "Federal agents, hands where we can see them." The two men with Elliot immediately raised their hands, their expressions shifting from confident to concerned. Elliot, however, remained calm. "Agent Harris," he said, as if greeting an old friend, "I was wondering when you'd join us." "Elliot Grayson, you're under arrest for conspiracy, corporate espionage, and accessory to murder," Harris announced. "Put your hands behind your back." As agents moved to handcuff Elliot and his men, Zariah looked around frantically. "Where's Christian?" A flash of something, satisfaction perhaps, crossed Elliot's face. "Yes, Agent Harris, where is Mr. Vale? I was so looking forward to seeing him one last time." Harris's expression remained professional, but Zariah caught a flicker of concern in his eyes. "Mr. Vale is being attended to. That's all you need to know, Grayson." Fear clutched at Zariah's heart. "What happened? Is he hurt?" "There was an incident at the surveillance van," Harris admitted as Elliot was led away. "Mr. Vale confronted one of Grayson's men. He's been taken to Massachusetts General Hospital." "I need to go to him," Zariah said immediately. Harris nodded. "I'll have an agent drive you, but Ms. Monroe—" He hesitated. "It doesn't look good." The hospital corridor seemed endless as Zariah hurried alongside a nurse. Her mind was a whirlwind of fear and regret. She should never have agreed to confront Elliot alone. She should have known he would have contingency plans. "He's in here," the nurse said, stopping outside a room in the intensive care unit. "The doctor is with him now." Through the window, Zariah could see Christian lying motionless in a hospital bed, tubes and wires connecting him to various machines. A doctor stood at his bedside, reviewing a chart. "What happened?" she asked the FBI agent who had accompanied her. "Grayson had a man watching the surveillance van," he explained. "When Vale realized you were in trouble, he tried to go to you. There was a struggle, and he was stabbed." Zariah felt her knees weaken. "Is he going to be okay?" The agent's expression was grim. The knife punctured his lung. He lost a lot of blood before the paramedics arrived. The doctor emerged from the room, his face tired but professional. "Are you family?" he asked Zariah. "Yes," she lied without hesitation. "I'm his fiancée." The doctor nodded, accepting the fiction. "Mr. Vale is stable for now, but the next 24 hours will be critical. The knife missed his heart by centimeters, but the damage to his lung is severe." "Can I see him?" Zariah asked. "Briefly," the doctor agreed. "He's heavily sedated, but sometimes patients can hear even when they appear unconscious. Talk to him if you like, but try not to upset him. His body needs all its energy for healing." Inside the room, the steady beep of the heart monitor was the only sound. Christian looked pale against the white hospital sheets, his usually vibrant presence diminished by injury and medication. Zariah approached the bed slowly, taking his hand in hers. It was cool to the touch, the strength she had come to associate with him temporarily absent. "You idiot," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "What were you thinking, trying to be a hero?" Of course, there was no response, just the continued rhythm of the machines keeping him alive. "Elliot's been arrested," she continued, needing to fill the silence. "Harris and his team got there just in time. Your evidence, everything you've worked for all these years, it paid off. David will get justice." A tear slipped down her cheek. "But it won't mean anything if you don't wake up. Do you hear me, Christian Vale? You don't get to bring down Elliot Grayson and then check out before seeing him face the consequences." She sat beside him for hours, sometimes talking, sometimes just holding his hand in silence. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, adjusting medications, offering her sympathetic smiles. It was past midnight when Agent Harris appeared in the doorway. He looked exhausted, but satisfied. "How is he?" he asked, his voice low. "No change," Zariah replied, not taking her eyes off Christian's face. What about Elliot? In federal custody, along with his associates. We found evidence at his home connecting him directly to David Chen's death, payments to the men who staged the suicide, emails discussing how to handle the David situation. Harris shook his head. He kept records of everything, arrogant enough to believe he'd never be caught. And Victoria? The Sinclairs? Cooperating fully, Harris said. It turns out Victoria had no idea what her new husband was involved in. She's devastated, of course, but also angry. The Sinclair family is distancing themselves as quickly as possible. Zariah nodded, processing this information. The empire Elliot had built on lies and betrayal was crumbling, just as Christian had planned, but the cost had been too high. He needs to know, she said softly. He needs to know it wasn't for nothing. Harris placed a hand on her shoulder. Vale is one of the strongest people I've ever met. If anyone can pull through this, it's him. After Harris left, Zariah continued her vigil. Outside the window, night gave way to dawn, the first rays of sunlight filtering into the sterile hospital room. The sun's coming up, she told Christian, her voice hoarse from hours of one-sided conversation. It's a new day, a day without Elliot Grayson's shadow hanging over either of us. She leaned closer, her words becoming more urgent. But I need you here to see it with me. Remember what I asked you at my door? I asked you to prove that your feelings for me were real, separate from everything with Elliot. This isn't what I meant, Christian. Nearly dying isn't the proof I was looking for. The steady beep of the heart monitor continued unchanged. Exhausted, Zariah laid her head on the edge of the bed, still holding his hand tightly in hers. I love you, she whispered, the admission as much a surprise to her as it would have been to him had he been awake to hear it. I don't know when it happened or how, but somewhere between your revenge plot and mine, I fell in love with you. So you have to wake up because I refuse to lose someone else to Elliot Grayson. She must have dozed off, because the next thing she knew, there was a slight pressure on her hand. At first she thought she had imagined it, but then it came again, a weak but deliberate squeeze. Zariah lifted her head to find Christian's grey eyes open, watching her with a mixture of pain and tenderness. You love me? He whispered, his voice barely audible. Joy and relief flooded through her. You heard that? A small smile touched his pale lips. Hard to miss, when it's the only thing worth waking up for. Tears spilled down Zariah's cheeks as she pressed her forehead to his. Don't you ever scare me like that again? No promises, he murmured, but I'll try. The doctor, summoned by a nurse who had noticed the change in Christian's condition, entered the room. After a brief examination, he looked cautiously optimistic. Your fiancé is remarkably resilient, he told Zariah. The fact that he's conscious and coherent so soon is a very good sign, but he's not out of the woods yet. He needs rest and time to heal. When they were alone again, Christian's expression grew serious. Elliot, in custody, Zariah assured him. It's over, Christian. Everything you worked for, everything you sacrificed, it wasn't in vain. Relief washed over his features. David, he murmured. We did it, old friend. Zariah squeezed his hand. Yes, you did. And now it's time to figure out who Christian Vale is when he's not carrying the weight of the past. I think, he said slowly, his eyes holding hers, he might be someone who's ready to start over, to build something new. With me? Zariah asked. His smile was answer enough. 6 months later, Zariah stood at the window of a beachfront cottage, watching the sunset over the Pacific Ocean. The small house in a quiet town on the California coast was a far cry from the high-rises and corporate offices of her previous life, but she had found an unexpected peace here. Arms encircled her from behind, and she leaned back into Christian's embrace. His recovery had been slow but steady, and though he still carried a scar from the stabbing, his strength had fully returned. Any regrets? He asked, his breath warm against her ear. Zariah turned in his arms to face him. About leaving Boston? Starting over? No, none. After Elliot's arrest and subsequent trial, which had made headlines across the country, they had both needed a fresh start. Christian had stepped down from Vale Industries, passing leadership to his trusted deputy. Zariah had taken a position with a small tech firm that valued innovation over profit, where she could work remotely most of the time. I got a call from Harris today, Christian said, leading her to the comfortable couch that faced the ocean view. Elliot's appeal was denied. He'll serve his full sentence. Zariah nodded, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. The man she had once loved, who had become someone unrecognizable to her, would spend the next 20 years in federal prison. There was justice in that, but also sadness for what might have been if ambition and greed hadn't corrupted him. "And Victoria?" she asked. "Doing well, apparently. She's taken control of the Sinclair family's philanthropic foundation, focusing on educational initiatives for underprivileged students." Christian's mouth quirked in a small smile. "She sent us a wedding invitation." Zariah raised an eyebrow. "She's getting married again so soon?" "Not her wedding," Christian clarified, reaching into his pocket. "Ours." He pulled out a small velvet box, opening it to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring. "That is, if you're interested in making our hospital room engagement official." Zariah stared at the ring, then at the man holding it. This wasn't the cold, vengeful Christian Vale she had met at the gallery, nor was she the wounded, cautious woman she had been then. They had both been transformed by their journey together, by the closing of old wounds and the opening of new possibilities. "Are you sure?" she asked. "No more unfinished business? No more ghosts from the past?" Christian took her hand, his grey eyes clear and certain. "The only thing I'm sure of is that I love you, Zariah Monroe. Everything else we can figure out together." She smiled, feeling a lightness she hadn't known was possible after everything they'd been through. "Then yes," she said simply. "Yes, I will marry you." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Zariah thought about the invitation that had arrived in an elegant cream envelope nearly a year ago, the invitation that had set everything in motion. Elliot had sent it to hurt her, to show her what she had lost. Instead, it had led her to what she had been looking for all along, not revenge but redemption, not closure for the past, but an opening to the future. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. A new day would dawn tomorrow, and for the first time in years, both Zariah and Christian were looking forward to it, not as the guest who wasn't supposed to smile, but as two people who had found, against all odds, a reason to smile together. The end.